Right, well, good morning. It's Sunday morning here. This is my third attempt at the second version of the mover component. What's happened is that I've discovered a couple of improvements I could have made in the first presentation, and I'm having a crack now at sort of doing the second version. First thing we'll do is get the webinar slide share up, and hoping there she is. And start screen share, good, and there she is. Oh, this is much quicker. I'm learning that maybe that the best time to run these webinars is early on a Sunday morning. Right, as I said, it's one day later, but never mind. 19th of February is good enough. And what we're going to cover today is introducing you to the mover component, the mover characteristics, how you recognize the mover, top dog in cars, then social skills, how you have the objections of a mover, how you gain commitment, personality dissonance, mover combinations, the NM, which is the normal mover, the mover hustler, the mover double checker artist. I put them together, mover politician, and then the mover engineer. Right. I thought this, I think they call these word webs, or web words. The essence of a mover is extrovert. And this leads them to being friendly, confident, cheerful, forward, outgoing, etc. And it really expressive. All these adjectives are all part of the mover component. The whole essence of the mover is the desire to communicate. And this means they're high in extroversion. And movers are basically extroverted, have high energy, and they want to be with people. People who are low movers are introverted, self-sufficient, independent. And I've got below that the bell curve. It's bouncing around a bit. And in the bell curve, the important thing to remember, as with all 7 components, is that 2/3 of the people are average. And then you have effectively 68%. And then 16% are at one end of the spectrum, which is the high M, and the other 16, of course, are at the low M. And extroversion is the 5-factor sort of one of the 5 factors, extroversion, that basically really correlates strongly with the mover. Mover subcomponents, just to recap, every major component of the 7, mover, double checker, hustler, for example, has subcomponents. These were developed by Chandler McLeod, and as mover is related to mania, the subcomponents are known as manic A, B, C, and D. Manic A, it determines your level of activity and energy. So high M people have very, very high levels of energy. Manic B is your cheerfulness, exuberance. Manic C is your motility of attention. What that means is you can multitask. And then Manic D is the characteristic is mood cycle and swings. What happens with people who are movers, they have basically, they bounce along at very high energy levels, sometimes have a very, very high level, and then sink into a short-term period of sort of depression. They swing. And in fact, the mover and double checker are sort of related in the sense that mover, manic depressive, of course, is another name for the bipolar personality disorder. So that's the sort of levels. And then just redefining those characteristics, movers are active and dynamic, and cheerful, enthusiastic. And this cartoon character on the right epitomizes a female with a lot of mover component. And you see she's cheerful. She bounces your office. You're trying to work on something, immediately starts socializing, asks you how your weekend was, uses your first name a lot, as you'll see. Some good giveaways are the necklace and the big earrings. Their accessories are normally sort of quite large. All right. Another thing, this is one doing a sort of walking down the office saying hello to everybody, which is another characteristic. Movers tend to see things in either black or white. They're multitaskers, as I said before, and they have fluctuations in mood, but they don't see things in shades of gray. So they tend to see, another way of looking at it is they seem to see things in form of slogans. Bette Midler is an archetype mover. If you ever had a chance to see a recording of one of her concerts, do so. She's incredibly friendly and jokey during the show. Organization, movers like working in areas where they meet lots of people. So retailers, fast food outlets, service organizations such as car hire, etc., hotels on the front desk. All these are where you want to put movers into play because they're cheerful, they're optimistic, they like meeting people, etc. Their dress is casual and bright colors. Kevin Chandler once had a lovely definition. They're the ones with teddy bears on their socks. And so if you think of an American or Australian wearing a t-shirt, jeans, Reeboks, etc., you're right into sort of the way movers dress. In the office, they generally have their sleeves rolled out. They don't wear ties. And the women have basically, as I say, accessories are sort of large earrings, necklaces, bright colors, and finally, a gambit, which is the opening moves. They're always late for meetings because they get distracted on the way. On the other hand, as soon as they arrive, they immediately apologize and they immediately start using your first name. They're probably the quickest component of all to immediately start using first names. Cars and colors. I could not believe when I saw this advert. It's for a Mini Cooper S, which is exactly the sort of car a mover loves driving because it's fast and zippy. They don't like flashy cars like Ferraris or Lamborghinis, and they don't like big, powerful cars like Mercedes. What they like is fast, zippy cars. And then what the person has done, the artist, is drawn a blue car and a yellow convertible for the extrovert and a blue car for the introvert. And he's right on the money because blue is the color of politicians, the politician component, which we'll subsequently learn is an introverted component, whereas yellow is the color of the mover. I always think of McDonald's, the golden arches and the M, and think of a McDonald's advert, and you've got the M component being acted out in a video clip. But a extrovert yellow convertible so they can wave at everyone as they're driving around, but yellow is their color. And I just could not believe it when I saw this is absolutely perfect, summarizing up a mover. Social skills. Tony Abbott is your archetype mover to me. Highly, highly energetic. I always think of the election when he was against Julia Gillard, the one in 2013. He was kept awake for the 48 hours until he voted. To the close of polling on 2013. He was on the radio in the night. He was everywhere. And the contrast with Gillard was stark. She went to one polling booth. I think she hopped on a plane in Adelaide, went to a polling booth in a remote location in New South Wales, voted and went back, and that was it. Whereas Abbott would have visited probably something like 20 polling booths on polling day, and he was just everywhere. Team is the magic word with Abbott, and they're very loyal to their teams. And you saw this, in fact, during his reign as Prime Minister. He was loyal to Arthur Sidness, who was under investigation, and for 12 months, Abbott kept him in the cabinet instead of making him stand down. And you only have to contrast that with Turnbull, who immediately stood down ministers, any issue with them. And he was loyal to Bronwyn Bishop for sort of 4 weeks during the helicopter affair. And of course, Sidness and Bronwyn don't have high movers, rather. What they immediately did is they voted against him when Turnbull organized his coup. Another thing that works with movers is they like saying yes. So you use the repeated yes technique, which is you ask them lots of questions that can be answered with yes. So are you Tony? Yes. Tony Abbott? Yes. Are you a former Prime Minister of Australia? Yes. Right. But probably more important than either of those two is to show lots of enthusiasm. They don't like cold fish movers. They like people who are enthusiastic and lots of energy. And you've got to be friendly, and you tend to be informal. So you socialize before getting down to business. And then when you talk business or the thing that you're trying to get through, get support on, don't paint the big picture. Don't go into lots of detail. Other thing to do is to emphasize the group benefits to the group of doing this. So talk about how people will benefit from adopting your proposal. Another thing to do is meet other people in your organization. To give you an example of how we did this, we had, I was for 4 years a general manager at TNT of their payroll management systems division. What we effectively did was run payrolls. We had not a good system, but what technique we did when we had the mover was we'd say to them, do you want to come along and watch a payroll in operation? And they'd say yes. So typically what we do is the payrolls are run at night during the night shift, is meet them at about 9 o'clock, have a drink in a pub. They don't need to get an expensive meal. Then take it and show the operation, have them meet the operations manager, the computer people, and then they'd sort of see we'd finished at about 2 in the morning. And they loved it because they actually were there meeting the other people in the organization. And we said very few people, of course, could do this, but we thought you'd be interested, and they loved it. And that often was the clinching sort of moment of the sale, is when they basically had met the other people in the organization that felt really confident. And Jim Carrey, by the way, is a great example of a mover. I mean, he's a real character, highly energetic and enthusiastic. Also, when you talk to movers, you minimize the detail, as I said earlier, and just keep to the big picture. On the other hand, the thing that you do have to do is keep in constant contact. They want to talk to you all the time. So I thought this is a thing to remember. And this is very, very important when you get to objections. Movers are probably the most dangerous of all components when dealing with objections. The reason is they will greet your proposal with enthusiasm. And at the end of the meeting, you think, my God, I couldn't have gone any better. This meeting is fantastic. And they rarely offer objections. So you think it's gone well. But in fact, they're friendly to everyone. And another example, I remember I was dealing with running a workshop for this company. In fact, I was using them, and part of the deal was I'd run a workshop for them. And it was quite good. And we were talking, we got along to prospects. And I said, describe to me your best prospect. And they described this woman. And after sort of 2 or 3 minutes, I said, yes, I get it. She's a very, very high M. And then I asked, where is she based? And they said Melbourne. And they were a Sydney-based organization. And they only had one office in Sydney. And I said, and they're a relatively new organization. I said, you won't get her. You won't close it. They said, no. She's so enthusiastic, so confident. This is 100% certainty. And I said, I'm awfully sorry. She is based in Melbourne. She said to me she's got high M. They want people contact. And when it comes down to it, she'll say to herself, subconsciously, you're based in Sydney. I want to deal with someone who I can see every day. I want to deal with a Melbourne-based business. You won't get the order. Well, when you make predictions, it's always interesting. They just said, no, that'll happen. Sorry, thanks for that, but no, we're signing her in the next couple of weeks. And I was back in their office talking about my project about 4 weeks later, and I said, by the way, what happened to the Melbourne prospect? Oh shit, they put their heads down and quietly said, oh, they went to the opposition, just like you said they would. And I said, look, guys, you have to focus on Sydney-based businesses. That's the secret. If they got any M in them, and I said M is one of the most common components, you got to realize they're going to want to base with the Sydney-based business. So anyway, so it came to pass. So I always just take that as a really good example how movers are very friendly, enthusiastic, but one thing they want is that people contact. Commitment technique. Technique with the movers, it's very simple. Simply ask for the order. I'm using this one in financial services. I promise I'm going to ring you every day and won't stop until you invest $50,000 in this fund. That really turns on the mover. Okay, you just have to simply ask for it. And what can happen is they're impulsive. They'll suddenly say yes, and they'll sign. And by the way, do get a signed agreement because they can be turned by the next person who asked them to sign and say, don't worry about the fact that you gave them verbal commitment. That's not the same as a real order. You have to sign a contract. Get the contract signed, get some paperwork in front of them. But it's just simply asking for the order and do it again and again, and they'll effectively crack in the end. In terms of managerial styles with the mover, they're good team managers. They work very hard. They lead by example. Their weakness is they rely too much on intuition, and they tend to be impulsive. And we, of course, saw that was one of the criticisms of Tony Abbott, that he was impulsive. Prince Philip, making Prince Philip a knight, for example. And he, would suddenly come out with these statements, which sort of put people off. They also react to me, I can remember the example that sort of sits in my mind is that he, first of all, recruited too many people who were former Howard ministers into his first cabinet, and he didn't have enough women. I mean, there's only one woman. It just wasn't there. And then when he was asked, who was going to be the minister for women, he then said, "Well, I will be." And of course, that went down like a lead balloon. I did discuss this with several intelligent women when I was president of the Cambridge Society, and we had our committee was in fact 50% women. And I was talking to one of them. They're all bright. We're talking to one of them. What do you like, Tony Abbott? And she said, "Well, no," and then gave me this example. And she said, how on earth could he suggest that he was minister for women? And he sort of thought, that's a very, very good point, and that's a classic example of the impulsive reaction that movers have. The other thing they do is they react to the person presenting rather than the proposal itself, and that's not good, right? So they react emotionally. They decide things emotionally rather than logically going through the proposal, looking at the criteria, getting an outsider's report, checking out the technical basis, talking to the end users. They probably do that, but they react very much to the person. So on the other hand, of course, if you're presenting to a mover manager, and by the way, lots of managers have M as a component, because you think about it, their energy, they're enthusiastic, that makes the movers. And I always remember this example, CEO, I was chairman of the company, and the CEO, Humm, and I always remember we were doing a tour of distributors, and one of the places we went to was England. And then for the weekend, we were going down to Spain to present to the Spanish distributor on Monday. And so we left Friday, and he said, "Look, you don't need to come with me on Friday. I got one or two things I've got to do. Just fly to Madrid, and I'll meet you there." Anyway, I arrive in Madrid, get there, get to the hotel, hang around, and it's early. In Madrid, you really don't generally eat till about 9 o'clock, but it was 7 and I was hungry. So I went out, got myself something to eat because he still hadn't arrived yet. Walked back into the hotel about 9 o'clock, and there was Paul. He said, "Where you been?" And I said, "Well," I said, "just grabbing a quick meal." And he said, "Well, what are you going to do now?" And I said, "Well, I was thinking of going to bed." He said, "I'll never forget this." He said, "It's 9 o'clock in Madrid on a Friday. We're not going to bed. We're going out." And I said, "Well, where have you been today?" And he said, "Well, first of all, I flew down to Rome, gave a presentation to a new distributor there. Then I flew up to Milan, gave a presentation to another distributor there. Then I flew here." I.e., he'd already done 3 plane trips and given them 2 presentations. And now here he was ready to go out. I mean, if I'd done that schedule, I would be going to bed. But the high energy, and there we were out to 4 in the morning. I mean, unbelievable. And that really gives you a good insight into the high energy level of an M, and that's what you want from them. Anyway, to continue on, personality dissonance. This is how movers are seen. Their enthusiasm gives you an impression of carelessness. They don't listen or hear well enough. They're focused on their own communication. Again, I was at a cocktail party recently, and Philip Brugg there, was the longest serving member of the House on the Liberal side, and there'd been the changeover from Abbott to Turnbull, and I said to him, "Well, what do you think of your new Prime Minister?" And his reply was very interesting. He said, "Well, now at least we have a Prime Minister who listens," i.e., that's his criticism of Abbott. He didn't listen. Okay, they tend not to be as thorough as desired, waste too much time in chat, forget to follow up on time, and their time management is generally poor. They're generally late for appointments. So that's how MEMS come across. And here's another famous M, of course, Robin Williams. Unfortunately, he's passed away. Their risk group are people to whom time management is poor. And those are 2 groups, normals and engineers. And then A's, artists, because they're naturally introverts, one in the middle. They don't like the movers because they found them bunches and enthusiastic and just sort of far too noisy and loud. And so those are the 3 risk groups. If you're a mover and you're dealing with either someone with high normal, high artist, or high engineer, you've got to tone your enthusiasm down. I love the cartoon on the left. There's a normal at the party still sipping on his first glass of wine. Well, there's 2 movers in the background getting ready to really start enjoying their party. So that's, to my mind, really sums up the sort of mover and the people that they turn off, which are N's, A's, and E's. Now we'll go to the components. Normal mover. Now this is Bob Joss. Please understand, he's also got a lot of hustler in him. But I remember seeing Bob Joss was the CEO brought in to turn Westpac around. They were really under the gun back in the post the '87 crash. Long story, but he came on board, did a fantastic job, right? Took the share price, which had sunk to $2, believe it or not, and he took it back over a 3-year period to $12. Very energetic with presentations, very enthusiastic, and typically their energetic approach to work leads to success. He's currently dean, or last time I realized, is dean of the Stanford Business School. They thrive on a constant stream of new activities. Sometimes there's a lack of thought in their people skills, but they're usually forgiven because they're highly sociable and their good intentions are really genuine. Another thing about them is they always think they're doing a good job, so criticism it bruises their ego. But Bob Joss had a lot of hustle. He scored probably one of the first CEO to score a decent options package. He came to Australia, worked for 3 years, left with $30 million. But the shareholders loved him because he took care of them first. That was his high normal. The contrast is the next mover hustler, and this is on page 117 in the Humm Handbook, is Alan Bond. Smooth talking salesperson. Have had the pleasure of meeting Alan twice, right, before he died. And Alan basically effectively was incredibly smooth talker, friendly entrepreneur. My wife thought he was charming. I met him at a dinner party. Values both financial success and social popularity, and that's Alan Bond to a T. He used his people skills to further his own cause, and he was incredibly persuasive. He himself described it. He said, just give me a minute with anyone and I can sell them, right? And one of the things he did, he was continually seeking easier alternatives which pay off. I mean, he's focused on money. And he did some great deals. The most famous one is when he first learned about junk bonds and leveraged buyouts. This is at a conference in Los Angeles, which they used to call the Predators Ball, run by a gentleman called Mike Milligan. The story goes that and they explained that they weren't interested in price-earnings ratios. They wanted price-to-cash flow ratios. That when they flew back from that conference, he had a couple of analysts with them, and they went through the ASX Top 200, discovered that the company with the best price-to-cash flow was Swan Brewery. And by the time, something like 24 hours after arriving at the airport in Sydney, they had a bid, they were preparing a bid for Swan Brewery. And when he made the offer, no one could believe it, because in terms of price earnings ratios, it was through the roof. But in terms of price cash flow ratio, and it was a terrific buy. And Alan Bond's trouble, it's great, he did some great transactions. He bought Castlemaine Tuies, bought Tuies, Castlemaine in Queensland, and Swanbury, all incredibly effectively. And if he just sat there and just kept them, he would now go down as one of the great Australians. But of course, he got carried away with debt and did the famous Channel 9 transaction, which, you know, as Kerry Packer said, you only get one Alan Bond in your lifetime, which is another story in itself. And that was effectively, this fault of theirs, continually seeking easier alternatives which pay off. Move with double checker artists. I just love this picture. This is the 3 most common components in a female. If you meet a woman, the first thing to do is work out whether they've got, how much move they got, how much double checker, and how much artist. They're strongly service-orientated people, happiest when they're around people of a similar nature. And we all know how females love to sort of get together and talk. They need sincere and honest praise, which recognizes their accomplishments. They don't relate well to unemotional people, right? They want people who are not cold fish, who've got a bit of passion in them, etc. And if they're confronted with someone who are abrasive, they can be retreative, right? They don't really like conflict. So that sort of sums up. But this is sort of the happiness is the M there. And you think it's women like, and you've got to look at women like to communicate, phones, talking. They're very much into family and into security. And of course, they're interested in fashion. So the mover double checker, again, elaborated on page 115 in the Humm Handbook. Mover politicians, well, that was Tony Abbott to a T, 108. He had a lot of mover and, of course, a lot of politician, incredibly competitive. They're a determined go-getter, eager to get the most out of life, and that was very much Tony. Very competitive. I mean, you know, very, very successful leader of opposition. basically brought down 3 prime ministers, right? I mean, Rudd twice and Gillard once. Okay, not all that sensitive to other people's feelings, i.e., and so that was his weakness. They tend again to take criticism too personally, and they lack self-restraint. And that again was, the criticism, Prince Philip, the women, etc. He tends to go overboard, and as I said, people, they didn't like him because of that, and it was a great shame, but that's the way it is. Mover engineers, they're interesting, again described on page 113 in the Humm Handbook. There's a big conflict between the mover and the engineer. The mover likes multitasking, highly energetic, communication, talking. Engineers are introverted and want to focus on and complete their project. So what happens with the mover engineer, okay, is that they like to focus on one project, but will be distracted by new social interactions. A lovely definition is they're a serious skylarker. They come across as quite serious, will then go do something. They're not bad instructors because they stick to a well-organized course, but they deliver it in a friendly delivery style. They're actually good team leaders because they work very hard. I mean, they're first in the office and last to leave, do put the work in. They're quite jolly, okay, but on the other hand, they do manage a project well and get things done. And of course, of any combination, these probably have the most bursts of emotion. The mover causing the energy and energetic one side, and engineers, if they get criticized, etc., can also have a burst of emotion. So you put that two together, and so if you've got a female mover engineer, for example, have the tissues ready. If you're doing something like a performance review. Okay, so that can happen. But on the whole, incredibly hard workers. They're there all the time, really focus, don't make bad team leaders, and make good instructors. As I said, again, the discussion on page 113 in the Humm Handbook. And then finally, all right, let's summarize it up. Movers are driven by the desire to communicate. That's the big thing, which I regard as the oldest, the basic desire of humanity, and in fact, the reason that the mover is probably of all the components the most common found in personality. They're extroverts. Movers are extroverts. So extroversion is their quality. They're optimists, sunny dispositions, and yellow, I always say, is their favorite color. Remember, when you're dealing with them, that the only thing more contagious than enthusiasm is the lack of it. On the other hand, don't be blinded there by their enthusiasm. They can carry you on. Show a bit of self-control. Look at the logic underneath it when they give you a proposal. Don't just reflect to the energy. And if you're dealing with a mover and you want to get the support for something, never lose touch and keep asking for the order. Right. Well, that finishes that. So I can turn off slide share now, which I'll do. Screen share. How do I do that? I turn this off. Right. Okay. Here she goes. There we are, back to me. And remember, I've got my yellow t-shirt on today. Hope you all enjoyed that. As I said, this is the second version, and next month's presentation will be webinar number 4. That will be on the politician. And I look forward to seeing you all then. Right, okay, I'll stop the broadcast. And thank goodness we got through. I've learned something. Always do this on a Sunday morning.